Well, thanks so much for staying with us, viewers, right here at Press TV. This on day 9 of the war declared against the Islamic Republic of Iran by the U.S. and Zionist regimes. We have been covering lots of action that has been taking place overnight in Iran and elsewhere in the region. But I want to talk about something that took place 2 nights ago, and this is in Lebanon, in the Nabishid region. I'm here with my colleague Maryam Azadeh. And Maryam, that night the Zionist troops tried to cross over in Al-Khiyam and also in Nabishid, where it was basically hand-to-hand combat. And everyone was involved. The people were involved in trying to stop the Zionist troops from entering their country. And there was an eyewitness that talks about there was a woman, it was a pregnant woman, who picked up a rifle and was actually fighting and firing at the Zionist regime. This is the contrast, people from the land, as opposed to what we saw a few minutes earlier, the Zionist settlers fleeing. Or either they're hiding constantly underground, or now we see them fleeing because there's no connection to the land.
Of course. And it's also because, you see, the Israeli regime is very weak on the ground. What they're strong in is the using AI, for instance, for murdering, for targeting civilians, for actually deciding where to hit also, which is a whole other issue. I mean, the use of AI in picking targets, and then if there are any mistakes, if it's a civilian target, which it often tends to be, then they say, well, it was AI. We didn't intend to actually hit that civilian target, where when you know that the AI has these issues, then, and you still continue to use AI for these issues and for these targets, then it is very much your responsibility, and you are and you must be charged with a war crime, as the Israeli regime must be, and as the UN has talked about it. Of course, the UN has only talked about it because we have the upper hand in this battle, and they wouldn't worry about civilian lives, of course, as they haven't really been worried about civilian lives in Lebanon throughout these over 10,000 violations of the ceasefire, as they haven't really worried about the Palestinian lives during the live stream genocide in Gaza. Anyways, the Israeli regime, their strength is in using technology for murder. And that the technology, of course, comes from the US regime. They are getting the latest weapons, but on the ground, they're extremely weak.
Yeah, as we've been seeing. I'm going to cross over to my colleague standing out in Tehran, Moin Amini. Moin, tell us where you are and what's going
on. Yes, I'm in Tehran. It's a beautiful sunny day, rainy day. So it's been raining since the early hours of the morning. So yes, for the past 8-9 days since the war began, the Iranians have been actually there is more cohesion among the people of Iran. I can tell you for a fact that the people of all opinions and political backgrounds have come together in defense of their country, showing us full support for the armed forces of the Islamic Republic of Iran, and basically vowing revenge for the blood of their leader. Another thing is that looking at the social media platforms, it seems like Iran today has turned to forefront for fighting global oppression. It's not just the people of Iran and those who are defending their freedom along Iran in the region. This is about all the freedom-loving people of the world who are now standing beside Iran, and showing support for Iran, because Iran now is at the forefront of actually fight international Zionism. Another thing is that one thing that has people very furious is that similar to what happened in the 12-day war last year, the fresh war by the US and the Israeli regime against Iran also happened when Iran was engaging in negotiation, trying to avoid war. So in the middle of the negotiation, the US and the Israeli regime decided to attack Iran. This is what Iranians are also furious about. Another thing is that people keep saying that Iran has closed the Strait of Hormuz. Iran didn't close the Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz has become insecure as a result of the attacks by the US and the Israeli regime, and Iran has to defend itself. So the atrocities and the hostilities by the US and the Israeli regime in the region has caused a lack of security in that region, and that's why ships carrying goods are unable to perform their daily activities and engage in their daily routine and their jobs. So one important thing also is that the US president, before the war, kept saying that the prices of oil will not be affected as a result of this war. But now that the prices are surging, he keeps saying that the prices will be rectified, that the issue will be rectified. You see, this is not, I believe, stable character for the people of the world and for the leaders of the world to rely on. I think, unlike most governments in our region and internationally that are basically supporting the US and the Israeli regime in their war against Iran one way or another, the people around the world and the nations are behind the people of Iran and have already shown their solidarity with Iranians. And it seems like the media censorship, the heavy media censorship by the US and the Israeli regime is not really achieving the goals that it has intended to.
Right. Now tell us about the overall situation in Tehran, Moeen.
Well, yes, we heard some explosions yesterday. It seems like some of our energy facilities have been affected. So this means that the enemies of the Islamic Republic are continuing their unconventional methods of warfare, trying to put a direct impact on people's well-being and people's lives. So, also I've had the chance the past few days to visit a number of civilian infrastructure, including schools and the medical facilities that have been destroyed as a result of the attacks by the US and the Israeli regime. However, as you can see, life, it's a beautiful rainy day. Since morning it has been raining. Life is going on. People are doing their own thing, and it doesn't seem like it has changed anything. Looking at the realities on the ground, it seems like Iran is having the upper hand in this battle, and Iranians with our high morale and performing their religious duties in the holy month of Ramadan. And I expect people to also be out in the streets tonight as well, breaking their fast and also engage in rallies all around the country.
All right, thank you so much, Moeen Amini, Press TV's correspondent on the ground there in Tehran, for being with us. And well, that's good news that at least there's rain that's coming down after the attack on the oil refinery there in Tehran last night. Breaking news right now that an Iranian drone has just targeted a desalination plant in Bahrain. Again, Iran has said time and time again, do not target us, and we will not target any of the countries in the region. Of course, we're talking about American interests in the region. Again, a drone has just targeted a desalination plant in Bahrain. We're going to cross back over to Toronto now. I still have my guest with me, Faraz Al-Najm. Thanks so much for staying with us. Faraz, what are you seeing on that side of things as far as reaction to this war in Canada?
There's a lot of people that are worried about the Islamic Republic of Iran because there's a gang of international thugs and terrorists working together, collaborating against one country. You know, and also, you know, people here that are especially human rights activists and so on, they don't want to see human suffering. They don't want to see more atrocities. We've watched for 2 years the Gaza war and what the Zionists were doing and how they were supported by tyrant Trump and you know, the U.S. administration, you know, giving them all types of resources and weapons and logistical support, and now they're doing the same thing with Iran. The thing is, luckily, Iran has been preparing for this, and it's a sovereign country, and it's a strong country, and it's also a country that can fight back. And the thing is, a lot of these people are also very happy, activist people in this part of the world as well. They're happy to see that there's a country that is willing to actually challenge and stand up and not bow down, because we have seen on the news and we have seen overall that a lot of these countries, they are like sheep, and they always bow down. And this is what the U.S. thought. They thought that it was so normalized for them to have all these sheep, such as the GCC countries, such as the Jordanian regime, and other little puppet regimes and proxy regimes, such as the Moroccan and so on. Like, you know, they got used to this, you know, and they thought that they're going to have a big farm full of sheep, and they can just sacrifice them all whenever they want, or they can just, you know, tug them whenever they want, or move them to the locations that they want. But now, you know, you have a nation that's led by lions, and they're roaring back and they're fighting back, and what they're doing is totally rightful. It's based on international law. It's based on logic. It's based on you know, the culture of that nation as well, to fight back and support their people. And this is what's happening right now, is that the world is actually watching a new part of history, and it's really surprising, and it's very shocking for some. And it's very shocking for some people, especially the Zionists, that are crying day and night in Canada. And a lot of, you know, you can say they're like false flags attacks in Canada. They keep propping up these attacks, saying that the synagogue's been attacked and so on. And then all these lobbies are asking all these politicians to condemn and make new laws and try to kind of like put the blame on the Palestinians and the pro-Palestinian people here. So there's a lot of dirty games that are happening. And actually, there's a lot of these Israeli organizations or, you know, companies or coffee shops that are owned by Israelis that have been caught red-handed from their own cameras at times, and different cameras, that they do these attacks on themselves, so they can play the anti-Semitic victim card and, you know, try to change laws in Canada and try to pressure and bully, and they want to silence us. That's the main point, and they want to look like they're the victims and they're in danger and so on. And the true reality of it is the same thing they do in Iran. They said, oh, they have nuclear weapons, they want to attack people, and now we can see the disgusting type of talk and propaganda that's coming out of many U.S. politicians, saying that Iran is suppressing the woman, and that Iran is suppressing children, and all kinds of like fake propaganda and a very, very evil narrative. Like, these people sound like they're coming out of a cave. They haven't studied what Iran is and what really the reality is and how people live and how prosperous the land is, you know, living under these unjust and severe sanctions. And I think people slowly are starting to figure out the truth versus the falsehood and the images that they're trying to build in people's minds. I think people are now not trusting Trump anymore, especially the way that he speaks and the way that he deals with people, especially his own nation. I mean, look at the ICE thugs and terrorists and what they were doing to the minorities there and the refugees and so on, you know, mistreating them and suppressing them and like treating them in the worst conditions. I think people are truly waking up, and the public opinion is shaping and shaking from different angles. And I think that Press TV is doing a great job. A lot of other small channels usually, you know, in the world, like RTV, also showing a lot of different narratives than what the mainstream media is doing. And mainstream media and social media as well, they're trying to suppress, they're trying to censor, you know, because they're so weak. They own so much of this mainstream media and they control a lot of it. And still, they're scared of a little bit of social media because.
And let me just jump in here and ask you a quick question, Faraz. Are you able to see Press TV right now? Because I know that there's a lot of people saying that there seems to be some manipulation and sometimes they can't access it. Are you able to access it?
I mean, it's on and off. Sometimes you have to refresh it. Sometimes it just doesn't work at all. You can't go on Press TV. And then sometimes it does work for a little bit of time. Then you can tell that they're trying to attack it. They're trying to sabotage it because they don't want the voice of the voiceless and the voice of truth and the voice of the free people. I've never been on this channel and ever had, and this is the true reality that I'm being honest right here in front of everybody, I've never had anybody from Press TV that works for Press TV ever tell me what to say or try to build a certain narrative or push me to a certain narrative. I'm freely speaking out for what I believe based on my research, based on our work that we do and so on. You know, they don't like channels like this. They don't like when you give opportunity to people that are looking for true freedom and fighting the human rights abusers and the ones that are truly trampling on international law, such as tyrant Trump. And you know, he's making it look like he's controlling the battle, he's controlling the world, and that he's winning this battle and so on. I think truly this man is living in a delusional stage, and he thinks that his demented mentality, that the way he speaks and the arrogance, I think he thinks he's in a Hollywood movie and he's going to defeat and control the whole world. And you know, especially after what he did in Venezuela of illegally arresting Maduro and his wife and just taking him out of the country. They knew they couldn't do this with Imam Khamenei. You know, if they were so smart and they were so strong, and that they really had that determination, why did they not drop their helicopters down and their fighter jets and try to take Sayyid Khamenei? Because they knew the battleground will make them sink in that ground, and the people of Iran and the guards of Sayyid Imam Khamenei will fight to the end, and they will be murdered. Especially these people, they would get captured. We would have more prisoners of war. I heard good news that there's some prisoners of war that were captured that are American. I'm not sure. I haven't done full research on that, but I mean that's a very good, successful.
Right. Yeah. There. Thanks so much. Thanks so much for being with us, Faraz Al-Najm out of Toronto, and thank you, viewers, for continuing to stay with us here at Press TV. It is 10:18 in the morning, this on Sunday, the 9th day of the war that was declared on the Islamic Republic of Iran by the American and Zionist regimes. I'm here in a studio with my colleague, Mariam Azad-Chen. And Mariam, I asked that question about Press TV because I'm getting messages from people in different parts of the world, some who are having trouble now assessing the channel. Or as he said, sometimes they can get it and sometimes they can't. It is absolutely mind-boggling with their unbelievable budgets and their lack of red lines for their propaganda and creating news that they are afraid of a couple of independent voices that the people can access.
Of course, we're not surprised about that because we knew as the U.S. regime controlled practically all social media. And of course, we know that all of these, so we look at something as social media, it's actually a military effort. However, if the U.S. military tells you to give all the information about yourself, your family, your friends, you're probably going to decline. But when it's in the form of Facebook, when the information is gathered from you in the form of social media, people happily open various accounts actually, and they try to keep in touch, and that's what they use on a daily basis, not paying attention to how much of their information is actually going to be used against them. And so all of this has already been in the hands of the U.S. regime because, of course, it has been developed by the U.S. regime for the use of it. And actually, a lot of these platforms offer better, actually better tools. So the Iranian Instagram, you can upload more pictures, and you need fewer adjustments, for instance, for pictures. The limits on the words are better. And actually, I mean, there's a lot of other ways that people can use the social media of their own country. However, the US also targets them. So we've had ETA targeted before. There's been hacks on the national social media that Iran has been using. Millions of Iranians are actually on the social media, as many of them are also on Western social media. And then we also saw when any platform can get big enough that to be considered a threat, to be considered competition for these American platforms, the way they deal with it. We saw how they dealt with the TikTok CEO. We saw the interrogation, the hours-long interrogation in court to finally get the TikTok to basically come again under American control. And so we know how they deal with these various platforms that are independent or that are different, that are run by anyone but the American regime. However, that in how how Press TV has been targeted, I mean, this is nothing new. We have been targeted in the past. They have removed the Press TV's website, and even in the way they label it, it's called state-controlled media. Isn't BBC state-controlled media? Isn't isn't all of these major media state-controlled? And as Feroz just said, actually, Press TV offers a lot more freedom. If you can ask various guests how they have been allowed to say all manners of anything that was their opinion on our TV, whereas in mainstream media there's a lot of the restriction, and if those working for those media dare have a single tweet against American policies, then they can be removed immediately. And so there's also a message not only for the people of the world, but there's a very strong message in this for Iran. I think Iran needs to understand that Iran is being effective, that our small media channels, though they might not seem to be able to stand a chance against the trillions of dollars worth of propaganda with the decades of experience, nearly 100 years of experience in BBC, for instance, that despite all of that, Press TV is being effective. Iranian media is being effective. And it's a very important lesson for the Iranian government, because you see, we have this problem of West toxification in our country. We have this problem of thinking sometimes that we need to have foreign sources, and oftentimes foreign sources that are, of course, mainstream, they are major, they have a lot of viewership, but are also funded by the same entities that are bombing us now. And so it seems that Iran sometimes makes the mistake of thinking that allowing, for instance, a CNN journalist, a CNN correspondent, or other correspondent that their parent company is run by a Zionist, that Iran, it seems that they think that that is a better way sometimes to get their voice across. And of course, CNN and other stations, they will say a little bit about things that would actually be to the benefit of the Iranian nation. They would actually give a small voice in certain areas to the Iranian nation, but at the same time, they also target them. They also create consent for the war. So as Iran is being bombed by the Zionists, American Zionists, Israeli Zionists, I mean, we know you don't have to be of course, we know Judaism is very different from Zionism, but Biden had, for instance, said that I am a Zionist and you don't need to be a Jew to be a Zionist. And so we know what they have been trying to do with bombing Iran. At the same time, then Iran had allowed the CNN correspondent to come inside the country to try to cover, and the way they had covered it, by creating consent. Of course, on one hand, in some coverage, they say, oh, life is going on as usual, regime change is not possible in the way they have told us. But also, on the other hand, they are creating consent for bombing Iran. In one headline, in one of their posts, for instance, said that the U.S. The strike was on the infamous morality police. So because there was a police station in Iran, that there were individuals that were not happy with the way the police station was actually enforcing the law, then it's okay for the U.S. to strike it.
Well, that's part of the propaganda campaign. I want to read something actually continuing with this, because as you said, I mean, we have the propaganda channels. In Farsi, we have the propaganda channels. In English, and of course, we have the propaganda entities on social media to continue this narrative. I'm going to read this, but first I want to just tell people what they're looking at. Again, that's the latest images from Ben Gurion Airport as settlers are making their way out of the entity as they are feeling the heat there inside of the Zionist regime. So here's a Zionist American who says, don't be misled by the spectacle of fires burning in Tehran. These are not strikes on the Iranian people. These fires are not destroying ordinary commercial facilities. Israel targeted oil depots under the control of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Now, this is part of the whole propaganda campaign. One, to demonize IRGC, the entity that has been protecting the country, and two, as if hitting oil depots that are going to explode in that city, it's not going to affect the people.
I mean, it was very interesting, and let me tell you, this is actually old statistics. This is from, I think, 2 days ago, where we know that so far, 3,000, and this is over again because it's old, because more places had been targeted, but at least at the time, 3,646 residential units had been destroyed. 3,646. And I mean, I don't know how many it is by now, but that was, I think, 2 days ago. And 528 business units had also been targeted. And we also had, at the time, 14 medical centers. So we're talking about centers that specialize in surgeries. We're talking about children's hospitals.
But
we're talking about all kinds of medical centers.
The people, right?
Of course, because naturally, as it comes to the Israeli regime, all the hospitals are actually headquarters for military. In fact, Iran International and other Israeli propaganda channels, they had put up pictures of a person in a uniform saying, okay, so this hospital is being used as a headquarter of Iranian commanders now. And we saw how they did the same when they wanted to target Palestinians, when they wanted to make Palestinians stop resisting, that they said, you know what, Hamas is hiding under these hospitals. And of course, the same, they made other excuses for the schools, they made other excuses for the stadium that they had bombed. They always make up an excuse. This is nothing new. And so, I mean, this is, but the statistics speak for themselves.
Indeed, indeed they do. Getting you up to date on the latest information we're getting in. Israeli airstrikes have just taken place in South Lebanon, and IOF has just issued more evacuation warnings to 5 more villages in the south. I'm going to cross over to Beirut right now. I'd like to welcome Leila Hatoum, political analyst, to the program. Thanks so much for being with us, Leila. Leila, tell us what's happening on that side of things in Lebanon, because we're hearing you're getting warning after warning, and from the IOF. Just tell us what's going on.
In Iran, we tell you that stay strong, because this occupation does not last, and this kind of aggression will eventually go away. My condolences to all the martyrs and their families, to the families of the 4 martyrs, and I wish a speedy recovery to all those who were injured, both on our side and your side as well. Having said that, it's very important for people to note one thing. The Israeli occupation is trying to do what you call advancing on the ground in terms of multiple points along the southern Lebanese front, and they keep fading because the resistance keeps stopping them and quelling them. Recently, this morning, around 3 in the morning, the resistance managed eventually to kick out the Israeli occupation who were advancing from the site close to the town of Aitarun. This fight had lasted overnight, and the Israelis weren't able to advance despite the fact that they had thousands of soldiers, whereas the resistance, basically what you call, has few number of fighters in that area. Having said that, the Israelis take out their anger and they vent it out against civilians. They keep threatening civilians, displacing them, and then attacking their places, be it hotels, be it residential buildings, be it clinics, be it hospitals and paramedics. The resistance retaliated by issuing warnings to the Israeli occupation's northern settlements, especially in Nahariya and Kiryat Shmona. The Israelis thought that the resistance would not carry out its threats, and eventually the resistance from the Lebanese side has been attacking Nahariya, the city of Nahariya, an occupied Nahariya area, and the settlement of Kiryat Shmona, one of their largest along the northern front in occupied Palestine, for the past 3 days, including overnight, including this morning at 6:30 in the morning when they targeted Kiryat Shmona again.
Now, it's something, I mean, it's been just quite interesting the way the resistance has been so effective, Layla. And you just said, you're talking about thousands of troops and basically the resistance, obviously not that many people, but have been able to be effective. I want to look at the overall mentality, I think one should say, because I'm sure for the resistance it was quite difficult during the time from when the ceasefire agreement was agreed upon, and watching the Zionist regime break that more than 10,000 times and basically not reacting as so many people were being killed. However, though the pressure is on right now, the resistance is back in active. And I think from a psychological perspective, it probably has helped them tremendously. I don't know. How do you see it?
Well, you have to understand, first of all, after nearly 10,000 Israeli occupation breaches, by now it's over 10,000, of course, and nearly 500 Lebanese people killed, the resistance finally decided to retaliate. And when they retaliated, the world tried to blame it for that. But the resistance was mentally prepared, and they have basically bypassed what you call the technology-related breaches that the Israelis had created over the course of the past years, because they were using technology to monitor and spy on the resistance when this resistance didn't notice that. So they went back to the basics with no technology in terms of communications, and this is making the Israelis' lives harder. When I say thousands of Israeli soldiers basically attacking or trying to invade, usually they send battalions, and these battalions have smaller units, 14 people here, 13 or 8 soldiers there, but they are backed by what you call thousands of soldiers on the right, on the other side of the borders, waiting to engage if anything happens. And they don't dare. The thing is, our resistance fighters have been waiting to fight for the past period, but they had orders to wait because the resistance was replenishing. The resistance was covering what you call the gaps that they saw in their armor over the course of 2 years of fighting. And then they engaged when the time was right. They didn't engage to avenge just Sayyid Ali Khamenei, may his soul rest in peace, who was assassinated by the Israeli occupation. But they were avenging every single people who were martyred both in Lebanon and Iran alongside that basically lines. They were actually carrying out 15 months of waiting to fight. And this is what people don't get. And we retaliated. We were not the aggressors. The Israelis themselves are in deep problem at the moment along the borders, because they cannot retreat, because their people will say, like, you went into that war, you dragged us into this, and now you're retreating. So you need to at least achieve something or admit that you were mistaken. And at the same time, they cannot advance because they know that the resistance is fully ready for the fight, because the resistance initiated the retaliation rather than the Israelis basically doing the aggression. We heard information, or we received information, and the resistance received the same information, that the Israelis were planning on this invasion. They were gathering 100,000 troops from the reservists to send them to the northern front. So when the resistance actually initiated the retaliation, that told the Israelis two things. It's a psychological warfare, that the resistance is ready to fight, and that the resistance has replenished its arsenal. And that's why the Israelis, despite the fact that they have over 70,000 soldiers now stationed along the front lines in the northern occupied Palestine, they are not daring to go into ground invasion. They threatened to do ground invasion. If you remember last week, they were saying, we're going to invade today. They haven't been able to advance more than a few hundred meters in certain points, and the resistance directly quells them. So this is the 64 days repeating itself now.
Mm-hmm. Well, Mariam, I mean, looking at what is happening in Lebanon, it's such a classic lesson for all in resistance, with the regime having thousands of troops, as Layla has just said, on the ground, but still unable to advance.
And of course, as she said, they target civilian centers because that's the only individuals that they can actually, they're strong enough to face. They're only strong enough for facing women and children. They're only strong enough for targeting schools and homes and hospitals. On the ground, they're absolutely nothing. In fact, as Hamas resistance had said, what's very interesting is these IOF terrorists, they wear diapers. They are so scared that a lot of them are young and men and women who have been forced to serve the military, many of them, because of course it's mandatory military service in the occupied territories, and the only thing they can do is actually murder civilians. That's the basic definition of terrorism. Terrorizing people into submission, and that is not happening. And let me tell you what I had said, actually, the statistics, the latest statistics that we had inside Iran, we had 6,668 non-military centers targeted. So we had 5,535 residential units. Imagine how they have targeted the homes of people. We had 1,041 business units. We had 14 health centers, medical centers, hospitals. We have 65 schools, Marzia. 65 Iranian schools have been targeted by the Israeli regime, by the US regime, that they have the technology to have precise attacks. So they are precisely targeting those centers. And also 13 centers that are for Iranian Red Crescent. So those who are supposed to serve the people in times of emergency, they have also hit ambulances, as they had before, of course, in the 12-day war.
It's absolutely amazing when we look at the type of entities that they are hitting, as opposed to, for example, Iran and what they're hitting, as opposed to Hezbollah and what they're hitting. I mean, it's reflective of the nature of these two entities. We have the resistance fighting against oppression, and we have the oppressors who continue to be as inhumane as possible. Layla, I want to look at the Persian Gulf countries and what is happening there and how this all is affecting them, because we know that Iran had said in the beginning it's not a war on its neighbors. However, it will target U.S. or Zionist interests or military entities there. Your thoughts about how this is playing out and what it could all mean for them?
Well, it's very interesting that from day one, the Iranians actually set their target and they announced it. It's the American interest bases and the Israeli bases and interests in the region. So when they started hitting those bases, and the Americans couldn't even stop the attacks, the Israelis couldn't stop the attacks, and it showed that the Iranians had mass intel on the newly established points for the Americans. So they had moved their personnel to a hotel. The hotel was attacked basically in Bahrain. But what happened at the same time? When the Iranians were advancing in that war against their enemies, suddenly we started seeing civilian areas in the GCC nations being hit. Oil fields, a children's nursery in Kuwait, the airports, among other things. And then basically the GCC states came out and said, we have the right to retaliate, this is not acceptable, etc. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Iran sent a direct message to their Saudi counterparts saying, we did not target your oil fields, so check who did that. And eventually it turned out that the Mossad were literally establishing false flags on the ground, trying to blast new civilian areas, and they were caught red-handed in Saudi Arabia and in Qatar. And that told the GCC states one thing, that the ones that they thought they were their allies, including the Americans, are the ones who are trying to push them into this war to fight the fight instead of the Americans and the Israelis against the Iranians. So they backed off. And there are new statements that are coming out, and we see basically what you call a cautious calm from the GCC side not to attack Iran. And that's a change in the narrative, because the Israelis and Americans at one point managed for the first day to push GCC states into threatening Iran with attacks. Now we're seeing them basically taking a longer time in terms of reacting to anything, and they're looking into every situation. And I'm really happy, because perhaps this is the awakening of some of the GCC states who thought that the Israelis are their friends, or who thought that the Americans are there to protect them. The Americans are not there to protect them. The Americans are there to protect their interests and the Israeli interests in the region.
Well, Mariam, I want to talk about Bahrain, because in Bahrain they have started a crackdown on the people there but a couple of things happened. One was very interesting. Americans were trying to get their troops out of Bahrain, sneak them out actually. Instead of using military vehicles, they had ordered just regular buses and cars. And the Bahraini drivers refused to drive those vehicles because they said they are not transporting their enemies. They're not helping their enemies in any way. And of course, the Bahraini regime came down hard on these individuals who were arrested.
So basically, these regimes are having to stand up to their own people for the benefits of the Americans, and it's out of wanting to be in power. All they need to do is to look at all of the other regimes in the world that the U.S. supported at one time and disposed of later. I mean, we had the Ba'athist regime of Iraq, for instance, that invaded Iran, that was supported by the U.S. regime. We had an 8-year imposed war in this country that people gave their blood and tears over. Hundreds of thousands were murdered, and they won the war with practically empty hands. But the same regime that was supported by the U.S. in the war against Iran, we saw how they destroyed Saddam afterwards. And so there is no loyalty on the side of the American regime. The American regime is never going to stand by you. Right now, you're acting as American toilet paper. That's literally what you're there for. You are there to do the American dirty work, and once they're done with you, they will dispose of you. This has happened over the course of history, time and again. And so, I mean, if you actually side with your nations, if you actually side with the interests of the people in your own region, the people who don't want to actually occupy land, the people who are living in their homes, they're not trying to transgress, they're not trying to threaten anyone, they just want to live their lives. If you stand with them, and I mean, they would pay a much lesser price, in fact, because look at this whole empire, this whole, what the Emirates had built. Dubai, what everybody in the world thought about Dubai, the perfect destination for a vacation. Well, nobody's going to come there anymore. Nobody likes to, vacation in the middle of a war. And so everything they had built was destroyed overnight, practically overnight. And so if you really want to survive as leaders of these nations over the course of time, you actually have a way to do so, because Iran has shown that it will protect its friends, that it will stand with its neighbors, and Iran has already done that. In Qatar, for instance, when Qatar was under siege, that Iran supported them, and Iran has kept a very friendly relation with these Persian Gulf countries, even though they have conspired against Iran with the Israeli regime time and again, even though some of the intelligence agencies of those countries were involved in orchestrating a coup against the Islamic Republic of Iran, even though they have tried to call Iranian island theirs, they have used Americans, they have used others to try to claim Iranian land, and even though some of them are Iranian land, I mean, Bahrain was part of Iran not that long ago, but it was taken from Iran. And so this is what these Persian Gulf countries have done to Iran, and look at how Iran is treating them. The Iranian president even apologized, which frankly, as Gisumi Shah Ahmadi said, it enraged a lot of people. They're saying, what are you apologizing for? But that also shows the other side of Iran, that as Iran is targeting these American bases, these American interests, these American facilities in these Persian Gulf countries, at the same time, Iran is telling them, we are sorry for the pain you're suffering, regardless of whether or not you deserve it for supporting the Americans. Let me just jump in here,
Mariam. So I want to tell our viewers what they're looking at. They're looking at these images of American soldiers' bodies, their coffins being taken off the plane. These are soldiers that were killed in Kuwait. And of course, the United States is not saying exactly how many soldiers have been killed. I think the last number I heard was 6, but we know that the numbers are definitely a lot more. They're trying to control the narrative, don't want the people, especially in the United States, to see the body bags coming back. They learned from the Vietnam War. During Vietnam, they would continually show the bodies returning home, and that made the people take to the streets. And once again, they're showing very little and talking very little about the real numbers of those who've been killed. I was reading an article, a post actually earlier, that there was a memorial for a person who was actually a policeman, but also he was in the military and had been called up to go to Kuwait, I believe, and that they said that he died of natural causes. So this is what happens. The U.S. does not give the correct statistics. We remember the first attack on Ain al-Assad. That was after the assassination of Lieutenant General Qasem Soleimani and Mahdi Mohandes. And we recall that Iran's missiles hit them hard, but they basically said that there was only material damage. But then months later, they talked about the number of soldiers. Still, they said injuries, but severe brain injuries. And this is the way that they try to control the narrative and say that they are winning, that they are not having any losses, because the American people, really, they do not want another war, but they are drawn into another one. Their tax dollars are being spent for this, and their boys and girls are being killed for the sake of the 1%.
I mean, those soldiers that were carrying a body, all of them know that they could be next. How does it feel? You're carrying the body of your fellow soldiers, knowing that you are going to be targeted next.
And fighting
knowing
for what?
Exactly.
Yeah, fighting
for the
what?
interests of the Western military-industrial complex.
Especially
not
at a
for
time,
any threat on their country, not for anything.
Especially at a time when the situation of the Epstein files are coming out more and more in the United States, and people, if they didn't understand who their political leaders or the 1%, the elite were, they're definitely getting a better understanding. So to realize that that's what you're fighting for, that must be quite difficult. And we also invite them to not do it for the sake of themselves and for the sake of their country.
On that day, which was the second day of impeachment and negotiations to examine the inadequacy of Bani Sadr, Ayatollah Khamenei had to speak after months of silence.
همه نباشه در بین تماشاچی ها و نمایندگان همه نباشه همه آرام.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحیم. لو خرجوا فيكم ما زادوكم الا خبالا ولا اوضعوا خلالكم. اگر منافقان در کنار شما بمانند و به جهاد با دشمن بیایند، جز بر سستی و ناتوانی شما نخواهند افزود و در میان صفوف شما تفرقه و تشتت خواهند افکند. در این لحظات حساسی که یکی از سرنوشت سازترین صفحات تاریخ ایران رقم زده می شود، از خدا می خواهم که کند و از طغیان زبان و دل و غلبه هوا و هوس نگه دارد و اکنون که پس از یک سکوت و بردباری طولانی و دردناک فرصت و تکلیف گفتن به افشا کردن داده است، نیز مانند گذشته ما را مدد رساند و یاری کند. مخاطب این سخن شما نمایندگان مردمید و آنگاه همه ملت ایران و بالاخره تاریخ و نسل‌های آینده که در کار ما به دقت و طلبگارانه نظر خواهند کرد. و من با این توجه در محضر خدا و در حضور شما و همه کسانی که این سخن را خواهند شنید اعلام می‌کنم که این جانب آقای بنی صدر رئیس جمهور را دارای کفایت سیاسی برای اشغال پست خطیر ریاست جمهوری نمی‌دانند.
On that day, members of parliament approved the Bani Sadr inadequacy plan and sent it to Jamaran. On June the 22nd, it was reported that Bani Sadr had been removed from the presidency by the Imam. 5 days later, on June the 27th, Ayatollah Khamenei visited the Imam in Jamaran. When he came out, he saw one of the army pilots named Abbas.
Of the arbitration over the 3 islands. Going back to the issue of collaborators, it's true, the collaborators are always used as toilet paper, just like basically Mariam said. Toilet paper is worth nothing, especially if it's used. And the Iraqis at one point or another were supplied with weapons by the French and the Americans, and eventually afterwards they literally went after Saddam Hussein because they want what you call burn notice. They want to eliminate any trace of the fact that they gave him the green light to go and invade Kuwait, and later on they got rid of him. After weakening his system, weakening his people, and weakening his army with severe sanctions, with wars, and then eventually going in for the kill. I can give you another example about collaborators. In Lebanon in the year 2000, the Israeli occupation withdrew overnight without telling its collaborators in South Lebanon, the SLA, the South Lebanese Army as we call it, or Lahad Army, that they were withdrawing. They left them to their fate, to the extent that Lahad himself went over and he said, they left us behind like dogs. Those are the collaborators' words, not mine, on live TV. They were afraid that they were going to be basically avenged or basically be punished by the resistance. The resistance dealt with them humanely, unlike if they were basically on the Israeli side. The Israelis also continued to treat them like dogs when they moved over to the Israeli side afterwards. So at the end of the day, anybody who carries out the agenda of another nation or another entity against their people's aspirations and against their own interests, this is what's going to happen to them. But I have to say one thing, again, the leadership in the GCC, most of the GCC, not all of them, have woken up to the reality that the Americans and the Israelis don't want their best interest. They have been feeding them lies after lies that Iran is the enemy. And in that sense, the psychology of the people in the GCC, you have to understand it. After being fed for nearly 40 years that Iran is the aggressor, from Iraq until today, they cannot...
Okay, seems like we have...
and say like, no, Iran is our friend, but they're discovering it the hard way with the Americans attacking them.
Okay, thank you, Layla. I'm sorry, we had some audio difficulty in the middle of that. Appreciate you being with us. You wanted to say something?
No, of course, very good point made about how actually those who collaborate with the U.S. regime, they do not have a pretty future. And so it's a very prudent step to actually try to cooperate with those who actually in their interest.
What's interesting that they haven't learned from that. I mean, it's not as if we haven't had examples of that time and time and time again. I mean, whether we're talking about let's start from Iran and the Shah of Iran and what happened, and you know, that they took his father out and put him in, or we're talking about Libya. I mean, we've had so many examples. So I guess the question at hand would be, why has it taken him so long to understand?
Or what stops them from going there? Because actually what we know, for instance, from the Mossad Project Epstein was that a lot of world leaders were actually involved in the whole raping of children on the Epstein Island, and the extremely dirty work they had done. And of course the Mossad orchestrated all of this in order to have something on all of these leaders across the world.
So you're saying
to
it's blackmail?
Threaten them. I mean, it could be potentially. It can be a variety of different factors. One could be blackmail by the Israeli regime, and we know how good they have been. And that's part of the reason in Iran actually restrictions that you need to have abided by certain Islamic principles. Otherwise, they don't even allow those people, often when they can, into positions of power. And that's because when you are a corrupt individual, in terms, I mean, in some ways it is, yes, we don't have that separation of church and state, and that helps, because when an individual is not corrupt, when they cannot be put in a place that they commit a crime, and then that crime can be used against them to sell the interests of their own country, then that causes a lot of trouble. That is why Iran is very adamant about, you know, when you put someone in a position of power, they need to be non-corrupt individuals. They need to adhere to religious values. And as we know, we have various, actually the followers of various various religions. I mean, we had in Iran's Congress, for instance, we have a representative for Zoroastrians, we have a representative for Christians, for the Jews of Iran, and we also have Sunni representatives, but all of whom adhere to certain religious values, and they're not corrupt, so that they cannot be compromised then, and then they're not forced to go against their country, basically.
Yeah, I think you just brought up something very interesting we want to reiterate, Mariam, is that what we have to understand, because of course continually when we hear the narrative from the Zionist regime, it's as if everyone wants to attack the Jews. Just reiterating, picking up on what Mariam said, the history of this region and living on side by side, Muslims with Christians, with Jews, and we know inside of Iran is that way, and oppression that's coming in the form of Zionism and those who support it. And I think that is very important to reiterate and make that difference. And I know, well, Layla, you're in Beirut, you're in Lebanon, of course, a very multicultural society, whether you're talking about Shia, Sunni, Christians. And what about that? How that has been used to try to demonize the region as if this is all about attacking the Jews and anti-Semitism?
Up because the first to attack the Jews in Lebanon were the Israelis. Out of 26,000 Jews that we had in Lebanon, only 500 we had in Lebanon. Only 500 families moved over to the Israeli entity because the Jews earth, because it doesn't fit or basically they go well with their the Judaic teachings. It's against Judaic teachings to have a state on earth before their Messiah comes. Later on, the Israelis and the French and the British started what you call the sedition between the Muslims and the Christians at one point in time in Lebanon, which played very harshly during the civil war, with areas being disrupted and the social fabric, after coexisting for hundreds of years, if not thousands of years, since at least the past 1,400 years, 1,400 years, people have been coexisting in Lebanon until the Israeli occupation, the French mandate, and the British mandate over this region, British occupation, came over and they started sowing sedition. And we started slowly seeing Muslims versus Christians. After the Israeli withdrawal from South Lebanon, we started seeing sedition that created Sunni Shia rift in this region. And we heard basically some of the leaders in this region who collaborate with the Americans, and I'm talking about King Abdullah II of Jordan. He was the first to speak about the Shia crescent and the danger of the Shia expansion in this region while he was in Washington in the year 2000. So at the end of the day, sowing sedition is what they do best. And after some time, it sticks in people's minds, especially if it's used in the media. And who controlled the media for the longest time before they got exposed? It was the West and their allies in this region. So at the end of the day, sowing that sedition between Muslims, Sunnis and Shia, is to divide the Muslims. Because imagine if we had unified Muslim stand. The Israelis wouldn't stand a chance. And imagine if you had a unified chance. And imagine if you had a unified, what you call, total Arab populations in them as well. They have unified stand. The Americans and the Western world wouldn't have a chance in terms of occupying this region. But it's always divide and conquer, be it on race, be it on geography, be it on religion, or be it on dialect as well. And that's where they play it best, because they are consistent in their media and sowing that sedition and creating that inception in people's minds.
Yeah, indeed, a very important point of that people have lived together side by side, various religions, monotheistic religions in this region for centuries. And Syria is also a prime example. Actually, it was the only place where the original language of Christ is still spoken, and unfortunately, those people have come under severe attack. And again, they're under pressure, and this is the situation that has continually been the reality in the region, the sowing of the sedition by the hegemonic front. Layla Hatimi, thank you so much for being with us on this part of this program here at Press TV. And thank you, viewers, for continuing to stay with us as Press TV as we bring you up to date on the latest situation that is taking place in the region. We're going to start our news bulletin at right now 11 a.m. here inside of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Well, it's the 9th day of the U.S.-Israeli war against Iran. Armed forces of the Islamic Republic continue to carry out retaliatory attacks on U.S. bases in the region, as well as Israeli-occupied territories. Sirens have sounded in northern parts of the occupied territories. Footage shows missiles in the skies of the city of Nablus. Meanwhile, Iran's Revolution Guard Corps has targeted the Haifa refinery with missiles in response to the targeting of the Tehran refinery. Sirens have also been activated in Kuwait. Now, according to the IRGC, a hybrid operation, including drone and missile strikes, was launched against Camp Buring, formerly known as Camp Udeiri, belonging to the U.S. in Kuwait. Meanwhile, the U.S. and Israel has launched fresh attacks of aggression on Iran, including the central city of Isfahan. Meanwhile, Iran's security chief says the U.S. doesn't have a correct understanding of the West Asia region, particularly Iran. The Secretary of the Supreme National Security Council of Iran says Americans think that scenarios they opted for countries like Venezuela can be repeated in Iran, but to no avail. Ali Larijani said the U.S.'s strategy was to deal a severe blow to Iran by assassinating the leader and military commanders. He added that Washington thought that Iran would collapse by such a blow, but the Islamic Republic continues its path with strength. Larijani said Iran has friendly relations with its neighbors. However, he noted that if an attack is launched against Iran from a U.S. base in a regional country, that base will be targeted by the Iranian armed forces. Well, Iran's foreign ministry has warned regional countries against allowing their territory or facilities to be used for military actions against Iran. In a statement, the ministry said the joint military aggression by the United States and Israel violated Iran's sovereignty and territorial integrity. It noted that the aggression triggered Iran's inherent right to self-defense under Article 51 of the UN Charter. Well, the statement said Iran's armed forces will continue its defensive operations until the aggression stops and the UN Security Council identifies and holds the aggressor responsible. Well, the ministry also cautioned that states allowing their territories to be used for attacks against Iran would bear legal responsibility, including the liability for direct and indirect damage under international law. Moving on to other news now this hour. Mourning gatherings have been held across leader Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei and others. Israeli strikes on Iran. Israeli strikes on Iran. Press TV's correspondent Nasser Kazmi brings us more from Islamabad.
Back-to-back mourning gatherings were held in Pakistan to commemorate the martyrdom of Iran's leader Sayyid Ali Khamenei and others who lost their lives in recent U.S.-Israeli strikes on Iran. In capital Islamabad, the ceremonies were attended by political leaders, diplomats, human rights activists, and religious scholars who expressed deep sorrow over what they described as a grave act of aggression against the Islamic Republic.
The Islamic Republic of Iran has always stood in solidarity with oppressed nations, particularly in Palestine and Lebanon. The recent attacks targeting Iran's top leadership by the United States and Israel clearly violate international law. However, such actions will not weaken Iran. Instead, they will strengthen our determination to continue supporting justice and resisting oppression.
The participants at gatherings strongly condemned the attacks carried out by the United States and Israel, saying the assassination of Iran's top leadership violated international norms and further escalated tensions in an already volatile region.
The war imposed on Iran by the United States and Israel is not just a war against one country. It is, in fact, a war against the entire Muslim world. Such aggression threatens regional peace and violates the sovereignty of a sovereign state. The international community must take notice and play its role. In stopping this dangerous escalation before it.
Religious scholars said those who sacrifice their lives resisting oppression remain alive in the hearts of the people, calling
forces of the United States and falsehood. The martyrdom of Syed and falsehood. The martyrdom of Syed Ali Khamenei and other resistance leaders will change the entire scenario of this region in the days ahead.
Participants called on the international community to take urgent steps to halt the ongoing US-Israeli aggression against Iran and prevent further escalation in the region. Speakers at the gathering paid tribute to Sayyid Ali Khamenei's decades-long leadership, calling him a symbol of resistance against foreign pressure and a strong voice for the oppressed nations. Nasir Kazmi reporting for Press TV in Islamabad.
And now turning to India, where diplomatic and political circles have been paying tribute to the martyred leader of the Islamic Revolution, Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei. The Iranian embassy in New Delhi opened a book of condolences in his remembrance, drawing diplomats, political figures, and members of civil society along with the public. Our correspondent Adil Mir reports from New Delhi.
Diplomats, dignitaries and members of the public gathered at the Iranian embassy in New Delhi as a book of condolence was opened in remembrance of the leader of Islamic Revolution, Sayyid Ali Khamenei. Ambassadors and representatives from several countries, including China, Russia, Japan and India, were among those who signed the condolence book.
The U.S. and Israel showed their cowardice by killing the supreme leader. They thought it would weaken Iran, but they didn't realize it will only make the resistance stronger. His sacrifice follows the path of the martyrs of Karbala. He was a leader for the entire Ummah.
Political leaders, members of civil society and ordinary citizens also visited the embassy, offering prayers and message of solidarity with the people of Iran. Many described Sayyid Ali Khamenei as a symbol of resistance and leadership for the Muslim world.
We have lost our leader, but he took Iran to a position of strength. Despite crippling sanctions, his leadership guided the country to great heights and dignity. His vision will continue to inspire the Iranian people. When I heard the news, I couldn't believe it. How can the head of a sovereign nation be assassinated like this? It is brutality and against international law. Those responsible will soon realize the magnitude of their mistake.
Iran's ambassador to India described the martyred leader as a guiding figure not only for Iran but for millions across the Muslim world. He also warned that while Iran prefers peace, it remains fully prepared to defend itself.
We have lost a great figure. His Eminence was our marja and our leader and our father. And always His Eminence advised us and said that you try your best to stand on the right side of the history. And in this war, you know that we, as an Iran, demonstrated our sincerity. And they, as an United States and Zionist regime, showed open hostility.
For those signing the condolence book, Sayyid Ali Khamenei was not just a leader. Many here say that his martyrdom is not the end, but beginning of the legacy that will continue to shape the resistance in many more years to come. Adil Mir, Press TV, New Delhi.
Well, the leader of the Islamic movement in Nigeria, Sheikh Ibrahim Zakzaki, and his supporters have held a mourning ceremony in honor of Iran's martyred leader, Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei. Press TV's correspondent Danjuma Abdullahi reports from Abuja, the Nigerian capital.
The morning gathering, led by Sheikh Ibrahim al-Zakzaki, prayed for the repose of the soul of Sayyid Ali Khamenei, who was martyred following a joint U.S. and Israeli airstrikes in the Iranian capital, Tehran. On behalf of his supporters in Nigeria, Sheikh al-Zakzaki expressed condolences to the people of Iran over the martyrdom of Iran's supreme leader, Sayyid Ali Khamenei, and all martyrs. He explained the sterling qualities of Sayyid Ali Khamenei.
He was indeed a leader of integrity. He's a leader who has foresight, a leader who has been given knowledge and perseverance and perception of what should be done. And he has managed the Islamic Republic for the last 37 years.
Many of Sheikh Zazaki's supporters condemned the joint U.S. and Israeli attack on Iran, describing the assassination of the supreme leader as an act of aggression against a sovereign nation.
It actually feels very devastating and unexpected. I am still in shock. Sayyid Khamenei is a champion of freedom, justice, equity, and the fairness all over the world.
Many supporters of Sheikh Ibrahim al-Zakzaki in this hall, and indeed many Muslims in Nigeria, said they were deeply saddened by the martyrdom of Sayyid Ali Khamenei. They said the loss of the Islamic cleric is not a loss for the people of Iran, but for the entire Islamic world. Tanjum Abdullahi, Press TV, Abuja.
Well, Cypriots have taken to the streets to protest the presence of UK military bases in Cyprus that are used to carry out acts of aggression in the West Asian region. Hundreds of protesters marched to the presidential palace in the capital. Demonstrators carried posters saying "Death to America" and "Death to Israel" and chanted slogans for the removal of UK bases from the island country. They called on the authorities to prevent Cyprus from being used as a launchpad for regional aggression. Well, the British Akrotiri base in Cyprus has been used to assist the Israeli regime to carry out its genocide in the Gaza Strip, which has resulted in more than 70,000 Palestinians being killed. The British bases there have also supported American aggression in Iraq and in Libya. Meanwhile, a rally has been held in the Austrian capital against the U.S.-Israeli aggression on Iran. Demonstrators held signs reading "Hands off Iran" and "Stand with Iran." Some of them also carried flags of Iran, Lebanon, and Palestine. Our correspondent Dieter Renich reports from Vienna.
Hands off Iran, stopped imperialist aggression. Under these two slogans, several hundred people marched through the city center of Vienna on Saturday to condemn the US-Israeli aggression against Iran and show support for the resistance of Iran and Lebanon.
We're today here to rally against this illegal war, which is violating every international law, and it's a huge danger for the world, because the US and Israel is driving us into a third world war. It has already begun, but they are increasing and strengthening this drive to war, and we are here for peace. We defend peace and we defend the right of the Iranian people to sovereignty.
People held images to mourn the martyrdom of Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei in a terrorist American-Israeli aerial assault. Banners read "Hands off Iran, down with imperialism and down with USA."
We, the people, won't stay silent. We will stand by what is right, because we have maintained our moral boundaries. We are here united to raise our voices against this unjust and illegal war. And we ask you to stand with us. Use your power while you still have it.
In its role as the vanguard of Western aggression and Western moral and political decadence, Israel, with the genocide in Gaza, has initiated a new era of violence and mass murder.
Speakers also criticized the Austrian government for their one-sided stance, in fact politically supporting the US-Israeli aggression. Earlier this week, the Iranian ambassador had been summoned by the foreign minister Beate Meindl-Reisinger due to the defensive of operations by Iran, while the government has not condemned the imperialist aggression and the murder of hundreds of civilians in Iran.
The Austrian government has failed to condemn the clearly illegal invasion of Iran. We would expect the government to take a clear stance. Austria pretends to be a neutral country, but in reality, it clearly sides with the U.S.
A new group of Iranian students in Austria has been formed under the name Iranians Against War on Iran, which is organizing further protest actions in the coming days. Demonstrations will also be held in other cities.
The people of Vienna say no to this imperialist aggression against Iran. They stand in solidarity with the Iranian resistance, and they will take the streets in the coming days again. There will be a demonstration on Sunday and another one next Saturday here in the Austrian capital, Vienna. Dieter Reinisch for Press TV from Vienna.
Well, March 7th, it was a global day of protest to support Iran in the face of U.S.-Israeli aggression. Rami Mazaheri has been present at a rally in the U.S. capital of Washington, D.C. Let's take a look at his report.
United States President Donald Trump has become the first modern president to ever go to war without the support of the American public. Top new polls show that only around 30% of the United States approves of Washington's latest attacks on Iran. Since World War II, every military intervention, big or small, has had at least a 50% approval rating at the outset of belligerence, with only Barack Obama's destruction of Libya registering just under that barometer at 47%.
People do not see any justice in this war, because it's clear that the Iranians were bending back backward to placate the Americans, and they gave a lot of compromises in their stand in regard to a nuclear program. But the Americans would not take yes for an answer.
A major reason for Trump's election is that he spoke rare truths about America's military failures in the Muslim world, capitalizing on the public's exhaustion with decades of deadly combat.
America should have learned our lesson years ago when we were finished with the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, but apparently we haven't, and we've fallen for it again. There is no proof that Iran had nuclear weapons. It wasn't even proven that they were close to having nuclear weapons. Iran is not a threat to the United States. I don't believe that for 1 minute.
Many say when it comes to Iran, Trump is sounding even more unhinged, irrational, and uninformed than usual, making wild declarations of both victory and surrender, showing delusions of American grandeur and Iranian weakness despite documented proofs from the New York Times and others of Iran's unprecedented military successes against American military bases and Israel, and evincing incredible and even dangerous ignorance about Iran's people, history, and revolutionary form of government.
The Democratic Party in the U.S. Congress, which frequently has been supportive of many wars, was critical of the President of the United States for not making an effort to convince everybody that the United States should go to war. So the United States has the apparatus, the media that's friendly to our government, that will repeat the things that our government says as a government stenographer instead of investigating the truth. We do have some journalists who still investigate the truth. Unfortunately, they are not the ones in charge of major American television channels at this time.
Many say Trump must retreat now, though irreparable damage has been done to his reputation as a creature who could rise above the dregs of the infamous Washington swamp.
The United States is grappling with its first military peer enemy since World War II, and Iran's unprecedented attacks on U.S. bases and soldiers appears certain to continue. Yet not only is there no rally around the flag hysteria, but history shows that aggressive wars grow more unpopular. Press TV, Washington, D.C.
Well, Palestinians and their supporters demonstrated in March through the South Korean capital to mark International Women's Day and to show that women are not only victims but pillars of resistance to U.S.-Israeli aggression. As they marched past the American embassy, they voiced their support. Frank Smith was there in the Korean capital of Seoul.
Palestinians welcomed their supporters onto the streets of the South Korean capital to mark International Women's Day, March 8th, and to proclaim the vital role women play in the resistance to Israel's ongoing genocide in Gaza and the West Bank.
The liberation of the land begins with the liberation of women. Palestinian women have never been mere victims. They are the guardians that protect the flame and the home, and the ones who will write the meaning of life amid the ruins.
Rallies and marches have taken place almost weekly here since Israel's genocide began. Among the more than 75,000 Palestinians Israel forces have killed, estimates indicate more than 50,000 have been women and children, who have also been early casualties of the U.S.-Israeli war on Iran.
That innocent women and children are victims of conflict has been further demonstrated by the U.S. and Israeli war on Iran. Events around the world have mourned the more than 150 girls killed in a single attack on an all-female elementary school in Iran.
With war on Iran reflect the Israeli war on Iran reflect the U.S. desire for regional hegemony and seek unity in resisting America's forever wars.
I believe the Israeli genocide in Gaza will become even more brutal and horrific. That's why I believe everyone who supports the Palestinian cause should oppose the U.S. and Israel's war against Iran.
As Palestinian supporters marched past the U.S. Embassy, they called out Trump and Netanyahu as war criminals and proclaimed their solidarity with the Iranian people. Frank Smith, Press TV, Seoul.
And with Frank's report, it brings us to the end of this part of the news right here at Press TV. Of course, we continue to, the ninth day of the war declared against the Islamic Republic of Iran by the U.S. and Israeli regimes. We will continue our coverage looking at the latest situation and also various analyses. I want to start off with some breaking news that another drone has been detected in the northern occupied territories coming in from Lebanon. Again, another drone has been detected. Sirens have been activated in the northern occupied territories. We're going to now cross over to Beirut, talk to our correspondent Hadi Hotet, who's standing by. Hadi, thanks so much for being with us. What's the latest on this situation over there? Please fill us in.
Of course, today the people here are waking up after an attack on Beirut's capital, but this happened after one day where Lebanon witnessed the most amount of attacks and responses from the resistance here against the occupation army and its bases on the borders and inside, deep inside occupied Palestine. Yesterday, the resistance until midnight did more than 33 operations against the Israeli army and its bases. We're speaking here about many types and different types of operations. They strike for the first time with a very heavy barrage of more than 100 missiles at the same time. They did an attack against the city of Haifa, the occupied city of Haifa inside the territories of occupied Palestine. And this was the biggest barrage of missiles that the resistance launched since the start of the response on the continuous Israeli Zionist aggression against Lebanon since more than 1 year and a half. We're speaking also about a multi-layer launching of missiles, where the resistance uses its short-range missiles to attack the nearby bases and the air defenses on the borders, and which opens the way for the bigger missiles to reach their targets inside occupied Palestine. Also yesterday witnessed many ambushes and direct clashes with the Israeli forces trying to invade borderline villages. We're still speaking here about borderline villages. So yesterday the Israelis for the first time sent an incursion with tanks and soldiers from Avivim colony inside Aitarun border village. When the force entered Aitarun, which is right on the border with occupied Palestine, they were ambushed and direct fire was opened on the entering and the incursion unit, which the day before the Israelis withdrew their forces to the eastern side of the village that was occupied by the Israelis in the last 66 days war near the newly established base that also received many strikes and many attacks from the resistance, especially with mortar 120 millimeter artillery and other types of ATGMs, and that the ATGMs in specific, the resistance is using them not only to attack the Israeli forces that are trying to do incursions inside the Lebanese territory, but also the gatherings of the Israeli soldiers inside the colonies that right now they are using these colonies as military bases for them. The resistance is still able to search for their gatherings inside the colonies and attack the Israelis inside their colonies, either with with guided munitions and with ATGM, or with drones, with many types of drones, suicide drones, or also with the Katyusha rockets and the Grad rockets that this war we are witnessing that the resistance is using the short range 15 to 20 kilometers rocket artillery to target the gatherings of the Israeli soldiers and their tanks. So this will mean that it's very hard for the Israelis to organize itself to launch a big incursion into Lebanon, because when they are gathering, the resistance is attacking the gatherings of the soldiers, even to the extent of many kilometers inside occupied Palestine. Yesterday also the resistance targeted Tabaraya and Safad with different types of missiles. The Israelis, of course, as a response to this escalation and as a continuation of the terrorism and terrorist campaign that has been ongoing on Lebanon since at least 1 year and a half, they launched yesterday retaliatory criminal massacres against our people in many villages in South Lebanon, and they committed massacres against many families, entire families, civilian families. They killed the mother, the father, and the sons. We're speaking about Sir al-Gharbiye, about also in Beqa Valley in Shmistar, and in Jibshit, in specific Jibshit village in South Lebanon, where many attacks happened on the center of the village. But also last night, actually after midnight, almost at 2 a.m., the Israelis targeted a hotel that is just a few hundred meters behind me. I have with me Lays Marouf, who is a known journalist based in Lebanon, and his house is close to the attack location that happened. Lays, would you tell me please what happened yesterday and at 2 a.m. and what was the response from the people here?
A Zionist drone hit the Ramada Hotel on the Rawshe waterfront of Beirut. The hotel, as well as most hotels in downtown and Hamra area, are now full of internally displaced Lebanese from villages in the south, from Ladahi. So, of course, there was panic. Hundreds of people came out of the hotel and trying to find a place to stay at in the middle of the night at 2 a.m. So this shows us, of course, the terrorism that the Zionists are conducting against the civilians in Lebanon, because it cannot defeat the valiant resistance fighters in the field in the south, as we see the same happening in Iran, where the Zionists are unable to defeat the Iranian military and thus are targeting civilians. This is exactly what's happening. Terrorism.
Thank you, Liz. With this, I can say, thank you, Liz. With this, I can say dates until now. If anything else, dates until now. If anything else will happen, inshallah, we'll have another report.
Thank you so much for that update. That's Hadi Hotate, Press TV correspondent there on the ground in Beirut. Please stay safe, Hadi. Of course, we know the situation inside of Lebanon is quite tense, as the Israeli regime has given more evacuation orders for the southern part of the country and other parts of the country. Hadi, I still have you. Hadi, last night was a very difficult situation. I think, do you have the numbers of the number of people who were killed in those massacres? I mean, we do know that the resistance has put up, and the people themselves too have fought a very major fight against the Zionist regimes. But I also know that, how many people were killed last night? How many Lebanese, do you know?
Until now, we know that as an overall toll from the casualties here in Lebanon since the war started, we are still speaking about 300 martyrs in Lebanon, especially after the aggression that happened on Nabishit, where the Israelis tried to land an airborne elite special forces unit, and they were ambushed by the people and by the resistance. And when the operation failed, they just launched a carpet bombing of the entire area to be able to save their units and not be captured by the people there and by Hezbollah fighters. And they murdered more than 41 persons from Nabishit village and from Kharaibi village, the two villages where the commandos, Israeli commandos, were trying to operate. This failed operation, of course, that came with casualties, because blood of these Israeli soldiers was seen in many locations where the ambush by the people happened. But of course, the resistance showed how much.
All right, we've lost that connection with Hadi Hotate. Hadi, thanks so much. The connection is not that good. We appreciate you being with us and filling us in. Please stay safe. Hadi Hotate out of Beirut. We want to welcome our next guest to the program from Tehran, Hamid Reza Gholamzadeh. Thank you so much for being with us. Your overall assessment, do you think that the Zionists and the American regimes miscalculated Iran's capabilities? Or what's your thoughts about where we are now, this on the 9th day of this war?
Condolences on the martyrdom of the supreme leader and, of course, a number of our citizens. We can have some actually evidence of the miscalculation from within the American and Israeli regime and their officials. Like, for example, first of all, just you were talking to your correspondent in Lebanon, and they had long ago claimed that Hezbollah is not powerful anymore, and they have actually weakened the Hezbollah in Lebanon. And what we are seeing, that they are appearing very strongly. They put ambush on the Israeli forces, and the Israelis themselves are actually admitting that Hezbollah is beyond their imagination. So that is the first example. There are examples, like, for example, President Trump on the first or second day of the war claimed that they have destroyed 85% of the missile launchers of Iran. Then he decreased it into 70 something, and then a couple of days ago it decreased into 40% of the missile launchers. So the information that they have, the calculations that they have about Iran or the resistance group is totally wrong. The same happened in last year during the June war, 12-day war, and during the January this year, and again now in this Ramadan war. There is in last year 12-day war, they were thinking that if they attack Iran, then there would be massive unrest. 85% of the people, to their words, would turn against the government, and they would topple the regime, as they say so. Sure. It didn't happen. And actually, Iranian nation got united, and there were, we can consider two things, two main enemy in June last year. It was the missiles and defensive capability of Iran, and the second was the Iranian nation, who got united and they stood against the enemy. Then we could see in the analysis and discussions that the foreign intervention was the reason behind the unity, and we need to reverse it. So they decided to have first the unrest in the country, and then the military intervention would be added to that. So it came to January 8th, when they actually promoted and triggered the riots inside the country. They had armed the terrorist groups, they had sent the terrorist groups and trained them, and they tried to have the riots in the country so that after a few days they would come and put the last nail into the coffin of the Islamic Republic to their imagination again. And of course it did fail, because the Iranian nation again turned against them. The riots started in January 8th. On January 9 and 10, the protesters who were protesting the bad economy, they distanced themselves from the terrorists. And a few number of people stayed on the streets, and there were detentions, as you remember. And on January 12th, just a couple of days after that, a massive rallies across the country was in support of the Islamic Republic. And again, people turned out and they defended their country. Instead of correcting their miscalculations,
excuse me, I think I've lost Hamid. Excuse me, I think I've lost Hamid Reza Gholamzadeh. But I want to look at Mariam. He was talking about miscalculations. I also want to talk about the economic side of things. We know that the price of oil, well, by Friday was $90 a barrel. We'll have to wait and see by tomorrow with the markets reopening after the weekend. But it was the market's highest one-week jump in history. It's going over $90 a barrel. Again, when we talk about miscalculations, because one of the things that Trump had said was that the oil prices and oil flow would not be affected by this.
Of course, and he had said that his forces were going to escort the shipment and making sure that they're safe. And of course, regardless of that, the insurance companies increased the price for the transportation 12 times, which shows how much trust they actually have in Trump's words. And so this is, of course, a heavy price that's going to be paid by the Americans. It has been paid by the people in our region for the longest time. So, of course, we are suffering, but you know what? This has been going on for the longest time. We've had how many military bases in our region committing all kinds of acts of terrorism, infiltrating in the politics of the countries that are hosting them, and putting, stifling the voice of the people, basically being involved in civilians being targeted, all over the place. And so this, for our region, for us, this suffering is nothing new. But for the Americans, this is major, because of course, on one hand, with the economy in general, how the U.S. has always exported its always exported its inflation, whereas other countries have had to suffer as a result of that. And on the other hand, I mean, the US has all of this oil that it's stealing from different countries, from Libya, from Venezuela, from Syria, and elsewhere. And so, but still the people are going to have to pay the price. As you said, I mean, it's going to be well over $100, and the people are going to foot the bill, as with everything that the U.S. has always done. And it's them paying a heavy price, $1 billion at least a day. That is the military spending of this unprovoked U.S. Israeli aggression on Iran. And this spending, while over 80% of the population had already said that they were against this aggression. And so they're paying the price for something that they were against. However, they did not have enough power to stop the regime. And of course, they are protesting across the country. We may not, a lot of footage might not have come out of the various locations, including the 50 locations where protests are taking place or have taken place in the past. But it remains to be seen how much the American public can actually put pressure on the regime to stop the aggressions in our region and stop making them pay the price for it.
Yes, indeed. I'm looking at various situations, of course, and taking place. I think, Mariam, we have to reiterate to our viewers, I mean, this is being called the Ramadan War because, of course, this has been launched during the holy month of Ramadan. And despite this, you're talking about people who are
and actually, Israeli officials have said at times Ramadan is the best time to target Muslims because they are hungry and they're thirsty and they're weak. But they don't understand that it's the month of Ramadan that has made us resilient. It's these Islamic traditions, you know, that we are standing against the majority of arms, the majority of propaganda, the majority of economic pressure, because we are the children of Ramadan, because we have practiced time and time again over the course of our lives the hardships that are you know, actually tolerated for a right cause, that actually makes you stronger, not weaker.
Yeah, indeed. But the point of it is that, of course, this nation that would be, and of course people are still fasting and participating in the Ramadan traditions. It's also the Iranian nation that this is actually just a couple of weeks before the spring equinox, which is, of course, the Nowruz. It is the new year in Iran, which it also this year coincides with Eid al-Fitr. The time that they have picked to actually launch this war, as Mariam said, in thinking that the population would be weaker, I'm sure that they're seeing that the opposite has come true. That not only are people fasting from morning to night, they're going out after iftar and marching, sometimes for hours, in the streets and towns throughout the country. As we've been saying earlier, that the crowds are just getting larger and larger. And then, of course, these people go back just to sleep a couple of hours, get up for their morning meal, suhoor, which is very early in the morning.
And it's the month that people actually gather. So if throughout the year the masjids are, you know, they're serving different purposes, but during the month of Ramadan, more people are in masjids and more people, they're breaking fast together, they are listening to speeches together. We've actually been to these masjids inside the country, and they are holding classes for people because the people are already, the mosque is their base more than ever during Ramadan. And so of course, you know, together they have iftar, they eat together, and then their announcements on educating people on the issues on the ground, also training them for what needs to be done. For instance, the first aid skills that Iranians need in case of their families being targeted. As we know, more than 6,600 civilian sites have already been targeted by the U.S. Israeli aggression, and the masjids are becoming, and as they have been, of course, in in the past, a place to train people, to prepare people on how to stand their ground as they're protecting their country, as they're coming out into the streets to show their support, but also on how to protect themselves against the U.S.-Israeli aggression.
All right, viewers are looking at images coming in from well, some of the latest images that have come in from Iran. We see we've had so many schools attacked.
65, Nazia.
65 now.
Schools.
65 schools
In
attacked.
only one, they murdered 165 girl students. That is only one of the schools they targeted. Yeah. And of course, teachers as well, the parents who had come to pick their kids up from school, and that was a double tap attack.
Double tap
we know
attacks
at
that
least
we're seeing
one case that what happened, this student was crying, and she said, you know, my sister had come out of school, but then my mom had gone in to pick me up, and then my sister came when she heard when the first school was targeted. She went back in to save her mom, and then in the second hit, she was also martyred.
Yeah, just so many tragic stories like this. The total lack of humanity, as again schools, hospitals, clinics are being targeted, and of course we saw the desalination plant in Qeshm targeted yesterday. I think I have Hamid Reza back with me. Hopefully he can hear me and I can hear him. We have some reports coming out that over 220 American troops have been killed or wounded in 24 hours. And 21 dead, many wounded at U.S. Fifth Fleet, and the other 200 at the Al Dhafra base. Your thoughts about that? Because on the one hand, officially, the U.S. is giving very low single-digit numbers for the fatalities. Definitely something quite different.
Yes, of course. First, Iran is targeting very wisely and with good intelligence. Last night, Iran attacked a place in Bahrain where American forces were using one of the government buildings as their base, and it was correctly targeted, and it was very successful. These attacks, these operations of retaliation would claim lives, but the Americans are hiding that. Just before connecting to your connection, actually, this interview, I was looking at the news where there was one person, one officer from New York Police Department, NYPD, who has been killed because of medical situations in Kuwait, and he has been there to help Epic Fury operation. So first, it shows that they are using even police department officers into the army. It seems that they are lacking enough forces. And second, they are creating and actually fabricating other causes for the death. Let's remember when Iran attacked Ain al-Assad air base in Iraq after the assassination of General Soleimani. They said that there were minor, minor head injuries, something like that. They created actually a term for that. Instead of telling that they have been killed, they said that they're having minor damages, skull damages and such things, in order to change the word and rephrase it, and not to say that they have been killed by the operations in the war, because they don't want the public protest inside the United States. Americans have witnessed the war in Afghanistan, they have witnessed the war in Iraq in this century, and they had turned into endless wars. This endless war term was something that they created for those two wars in the Middle East, and then it remarks and shows the massive casualties that the Americans suffered for no reason. The reason behind the attack on Iraq was totally wrong, and false flags were used, and the lies were behind the attack against Iraq, and it is clear to everyone now. And many people were dead to that. J.D. Vance, and Tulsi Gabbard from the current administration in Washington, where people who fought in those war, they were there, and you can see that they are against military operations because they have been there. They have seen how war devastates the lives of the American forces and the American people, and how they consume the American money, the tax monies that the Americans are paying. So because of that, because people turn against such an operation, and the casualties, if announced, would be a huge blow to the American public trust to the government and public, actually, favorability of the government. So they are hiding that. Because, again, that mentality that they have, that the Iranians are weak, the resistance are weak, and the Hezbollah are weak, they do not want to admit that their forces have been killed by the retaliation of those forces that they have always claimed that they are very weak, and we are going to destroy them, we are going to obliterate them, and such wording that we have heard from people like President Trump. So yes, they are doing their best to hide the facts and the numbers. I remember that I was working in media, and I remember that it was a rule for the American, especially American media, that they were not allowed to publish any news of casualties for at least 24 hours. And after 24 hours, you are in the news. You know that. After 24 hours, news is not anymore news, and you would ignore that because a lot of other things have happened, and it would be out of the headlines. So in order to hide the facts, they did that. And now it was in Iraq and Afghanistan where war was actually concentrated in one place. Now the casualties are in different countries in the Persian Gulf, and different American bases in Qatar, in UAE, in Bahrain, in Kuwait, in Saudi Arabia. In different places, there are actually giving casualties. And there are no reporters, no journalists located in one place to observe only casualties, to publish the news. So since they are not such a thing, the administration can easier hide the facts, and they can easier hide the casualties. So yes, they say that 6, I think, and they have admitted 6 casualties with this recent one.
Yeah.
7. Why we can see easily that hundreds and I think more than 1,000 people, American forces have been killed in those accurate retaliation attacks that Iran has carried out.
Yes, time will tell exactly how many. And yes, you're right. After the attacks on Ain al-Assad, they said that some had concussions, and we found out later on there were severe brain injuries, and I don't think we ever found out exactly how many died in that. Well, Mariam, I want to look at a statement from one of the former commanders of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, Mohsen Rezai. He says, the dark day awaits Netanyahu and the Israeli army. One reason we are gradually increasing the wave of our attacks is that the Israelis are fleeing. We call on the Israeli people to evacuate and flee as soon as possible.
He actually said Israeli people. That is amazing. Because settlers, I mean, we have seen what these settlers have done to Palestinians. We have talked about the genocide tourism that they were going on, getting on these ships to get closer to Gaza as they were bombing Gaza, as they were bombing homes and schools and hospitals, the tents people were in. They watched and laughed people burn alive. Before all of the aggression started, before the genocide intensified, they were celebrating water, wasting electricity, saying, oh, look, you don't have this water, you don't have this electricity, because we have shut it down. We've made sure that you have nothing. And so we have seen the way they have worn makeup, mocking Palestinians. Even they had their children mock Palestinians. And these videos are all over the place. I mean, they cannot deny that they have done this. And they have have done this thinking that it's actually going to earn them more power, because when you threaten people and when you tell people that, you know, our entire so-called nation is behind all of this genocide, all of this aggression, then they know that, you know, there is nobody to protect them. There is, obviously, they understand that the United Nations stands for nothing. They understand that the Geneva Convention doesn't mean anything at all when it comes, of course, to the protecting of the people who are not in line with the Western aggressions, who are not on the same side. And for an Iranian official and for the Islamic Republic to allow for these settlers, for these murderers, for these individuals, for these creatures who celebrated the murder of children, who celebrated the burning of children, the decapitation of children, who targeted children. I mean, so many Palestinian children were taken to hospitals where they were targeted. There are so many accounts. I mean, can't even talk about it. One of the most painful to me is when people were given back the remains of their children in plastic bags. And because of the way these Israeli bombs, because they were designed to shred the flesh of people, then they didn't know which flesh was whose baby, whose child, whose father, whose mom. And so they had to weigh. And so imagine if it's about 60 kilos of flesh, then here's your 60 kilos of flesh. That's probably your mom or dad. And if it's, we have seen this patients. We try to separate as much as possible anyone who hasn't directly murdered people. And of course, a lot of these settlers fleeing have already directly targeted people because they are IOF soldiers, because mandatory military service for Israeli males and females. And so, I mean, it really takes a significant moral high ground. I don't think anyone in the world could really understand. I certainly cannot understand, because we have seen what they have done to people. We have seen what they have done to tents, to hospitals, to schools. We have seen the babies. And so it's very hard. But then again, it seems like the approach of the Islamic Republic is very much stands as its own of the morality of the Islamic Republic, that if there is any way that a settler hasn't committed some heinous crime, let them get out before they're targeted. And why are they being targeted? For the most part, because the IOF headquarters are in the middle of Tel Aviv. So maybe ask those criminals why they have built their headquarters in the middle of civilian centers. Of course, they have always accused the resistance of, in a very densely populated area in Gaza, they had constantly accused Hamas of building its centers in civilian areas, and look at what the IOF has done. So the only reason they are under any threat right now is the IOF, and yet the Islamic Republic of Iran is making sure that those who perhaps have yet to commit crimes can get out of the occupied territories.
Okay, I just want to go to some other news of American soldiers who have been captured. Now, we had heard rumors of that before, and now Iran's top security officials says that some American soldiers have been captured during their latest round of aggression. I still don't have information how many exactly, because there are lots of things being said online, but I'm just waiting for official confirmation before I report it here. But we do know, also according to the Secretary of the Supreme National Security Council of Iran, Ali Larijani, that there were at least several soldiers who have been taken prisoner. Of course, on the same side, talking about the U.S., they're not reporting this. They're talking, basically saying that a couple of these soldiers are among the 6 fatalities that they are reporting. But obviously that is not the case. And of course, we're continuing to follow up with everything here, lots of things happening. And again, reiterating that there were attacks on Iran last night until this morning. And we know that the oil depot, well, a couple of them were hit, and it's even affecting the weather today, especially in the capital, Tehran, where the oil depots were hit. We have an environmental crisis also taking place because of that. And again, we reiterate the type of places that these entities are targeting. And then at the end of the day, they say that it's not a target on the Iranian people. Of course, every target, every bomb, every missile that is dropped is affecting the Iranian people. At the same time, Iran has responded both to the U.S. regime and the Israeli regime very fiercely because of what has happened and continues to happen. And Iran said from the very beginning, we do not want a war, we will not start a war, but we will be the one to say when it finishes. So, of course, we continue with this right here at Press TV. I believe that I have my colleagues. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for being with us. Hamid Reza Gholamzadeh, thank you, and Mariam Azad Chair, my colleague here in the studio with me. We appreciate you viewers staying with us at Press TV. Let's take a quick break, and I think we're going to cross over to my colleagues in Beirut.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. You are watching Press TV live from our Beirut studios right here in the Lebanese capital Beirut, and we are here to give you the latest updates about the events unfolding in the region of West Asia. We're going to start with a very sorrowful morning in Lebanon, in southern Lebanon in specific, where two massacres were committed by the Zionist Israeli terrorist entity against civilians residing in their own houses at dawn. This morning we have a town of Tahfehta, which awoke to a devastating tragedy after an Israeli terrorist airstrike targeted a three-story home belonging to the Izzuddin family, killing 8 members of the same family. This has left the community in quite a shock, because this was a residential area and only a residential area. And we have another massacre that was committed against an entire family that was wiped out from the civil registry by the terrorist Israeli entity at dawn, with 20 people have been martyred, including women and children, in a horrific massacre carried out by the Zionist occupation after it bombed an entire residential block in the southern Lebanese town of Sir al-Gharbiyye. So homes were just reduced to rubble, and with them the whole family was erased in a single moment. To discuss that and more with me is Mr. Ali Rizq. Thank you very much, Mr. Ali Rizq, for joining us this morning. You most probably have heard about the massacres and how the Israeli entity, it's not a surprise that they keep targeting civilians, and at dawn as well when people are supposedly in their homes feeling. Why is the Israeli entity upping the ante by committing massacres at this moment in this war?
This is the traditional Israeli approach or Israeli strategy. They have a very rich history in terms of committing massacres, the Qana massacre, other massacres which they've committed. And I think part of it is aimed to make the Lebanese people, and especially the Lebanese Shia community, turn against Hezbollah, against the resistance. I think this is a strategy which they've intensified, by the way, when they target Al-Qard al-Hassan, for example, and other institutions, financial institutions. The end objective is to turn especially the Lebanese Shias against the resistance. Now, Will this succeed or not? No, I don't believe it will succeed for various reasons. There's an ideology which I think that they continue to underestimate. The Lebanese Shias as well, they have to confront the threat not just from Israel but from the Salafi jihadis in Syria. So I would argue that the Lebanese Shia, or at least a sizable segment of them, still remain firmly supportive of their resistance. But again, this is standard Israeli practice, to carry out massacres, to punish, one of the objectives being to turn the population against the resistance.
Well, we've seen that also attempt in Iran by targeting schools and hospitals and stadiums and every corner that usually should be safe for civilians. And ever since the war had kick-started, we have seen Iranians in the streets demanding revenge, supporting their army, supporting their Revolution Guard Corps. In Lebanon, during the past war, we didn't see any sort of sit-ins or marches, but this time there's something different happening at the level of the society in Lebanon. There was a sit-in 3 days ago in front of the Lebanese House of Government, in front of the palace, and today there is a call for a march that will take place, if I'm not mistaken, in Hamra Street, and the organizers are civil society who have been displaced from their houses, whether from the southern part of Lebanon or from the southern suburbs of Beirut. And they say, and this is how they are calling for that march. They're saying, for 3 years now, the Americans and their allies have been waging a savage war against our country, an extermination campaign, a war of uprooting reminiscent of what fascism once attempted. It is among the ugliest wars since World War II, and yet in the midst of this there are still leftists, Islamists and liberals who justify or support the war, pointing to either the flaws, shortcomings or mistakes of those defending their people and their homeland, or simply because they just disagree with them. So because of that, we are insisting on having a march in Hamra today on March 8th at 4 p.m. And it will be a popular march. What is happening? Why are the people choosing this time to go to the streets?
Well, what's different between this time and the previous war, the 66-day war, is that you didn't have a government back then which was so anti-resistance, so to speak. Nawaf Salam, we all know his record, his statements. We saw the decision which the government issued banning Hezbollah's security and military activities. So I think, to answer your question, why we're seeing this, I think a major reason is because of the behavior of this government, which has gone beyond any other Lebanese government in terms of taking an anti-resistance stance, in terms of being so submissive to the Israeli agenda and to the American agenda. And so I think that's the best explanation, the performance and the very weak performance of this Lebanese government, the fact that it's giving in so much to an enemy which can't be given into. I mean, Israel, especially Israel, and especially this Israeli government, the more you give in to this Israeli government, the more its ambitions and its conspiracies to take over Lebanon are going to increase. So I think this is a reflection of the realization of the danger regarding the plans the Israelis have for Lebanon if, God forbid, they were to succeed in defeating Hezbollah and having a real opportunity to implement their agenda in Lebanon.
What do they aspire to see as an end result of these marches?
Well, I think they aspire most of all for the Lebanese government at least not to conspire against the resistance.
That's not going to happen, Mr. Ali. That's not going to happen. These people were put in place to do exactly what the Americans want them to do.
Actually, I think it's more than just what the Americans want them to do. I think that they are just as enthusiastic as the Americans, even more perhaps, Nawaf Salam, for example.
Yeah.
So it's not just about a foreign agenda. You have individuals who see this as part of their own legacy. Nawaf Salam, for example, he places this issue above anything else. He thinks that he will go down in the history books as being the Lebanese Prime Minister who was able to disarm Hezbollah under his watch. And he even downplays the danger of civil war. Now, President Joseph Aoun at least he doesn't. He's aware of the danger of civil war. That's why he's taking a more rational stance.
Yeah.
So it's not just about a foreign agenda, it's also about their own individual personal stances. Now, it's not going to happen. The Lebanese government is going to continue to conspire, probably.
Yeah.
Yes, they are going to continue, but we have, I think, a Lebanese army commander who's proven himself to be quite rational in his thinking, to be someone who wants to avoid being dragged into a civil war. And remember that he was asked by Lindsey Graham when he went to Washington about answers.
So there's a probability that these marches might increase into full-on protests to overthrow the government before any possible clashes that could result into an internal strife in Lebanon?
I think that's an important question. It's possible that they will increase. What's interesting about these marches is that it's civil society.
Yeah,
it's not that Hezbollah has called for them or another group. That's, I think, an important signal, an important message to the Lebanese government. And if the Lebanese government continues to go so far in conspiring, perhaps, yes, we could see a kind of coalition forming between civil society, supporters of the resistance, so you'd have a large mass which would gather, rally around one objective, and that could pose a serious challenge to the current Lebanese government.
And I think what's also interesting in my view is that these marches are coming after supposed attempts by the French authorities to try and find a way out for Zionist Israel from the war on Lebanon by supposedly claiming that they can stop this if, and they had a lot of ifs, a few of which were that Hezbollah must disarm completely, Hezbollah must stop any military activity, Hezbollah must retreat from the Litani, and etc., etc. So as if Hezbollah has lost the war, when in reality, up until now, no achievement was made by Zionist Israel except the obvious, which is destruction and massacres. But what's interesting is that after this attempt, and when Hezbollah was approached and they said that they want to open up a negotiation process, a new negotiation process, or from what to pick up where it was left, with the speaker Nabih Berri, who's a very important ally of Hezbollah. Hezbollah's message and reply was, no. One, we are not ready. Two, when you want to negotiate, you're going to negotiate directly with us. Three, all of your conditions are denied. How do you see that?
So you're saying that the interesting that the march is taking place against the backdrop of these events?
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
It's just after those events happened, because we know previously, Mr. Ali, that the resistance would always say whatever the speaker says, we will follow. But they tried that in the past 15 months, and apparently they weren't happy.
Yes, look, many people say that the deal which was made, the ceasefire deal, perhaps wasn't the best deal that could be made. Now Hezbollah is saying it's going to negotiate, or that any negotiations must take place with itself. Because this is about, I think, Hezbollah's existence. Hezbollah is a target, and so when you're a target, when it's about your existence, I think it might be sometimes a risky endeavor to have others negotiate. The stakes are this high.
But so could it be, I'm sorry to interrupt you, could it be that it is because of the non-existence, even conserved position of the Amal movement during the meeting with the government when Nawaf Salam decided to ban Hezbollah completely? Amal movement had no role to stop or even to register a conservative position?
Yeah, it might be that I don't have any inside information, that there is possibly an emerging rift now between Hezbollah and the Amal movement, but I would be cautious. Some have said, for example, that Speaker Berri had to take this step, but behind the scenes there is still cooperation taking place.
And the evidence was that multiple martyrs for the Amal movement fell on the front line, especially in Khiam. In our village, 2 of them fell as martyrs in Khiam, so that gives evidence to your theory.
Yeah. And look, at the same time, the Amal movement, you have a senior politician who leads the Amal movement. It's the Speaker of the Parliament. The Speaker of the Parliament needs to take certain factors into consideration more than Hezbollah would need to take certain factors into consideration.
True.
So that's something which we always must remember when we discuss the relationship between the Amal movement and Hezbollah. The Amal movement has to behave much more like a state actor. Hezbollah isn't forced to behave that much as a state actor. So I think that
it will be a speech that it will be a fight until the death. So no, we're not going to retreat. No, we're not going to stop resisting, and we're not going to allow Zionist Israel either to occupy or to infiltrate. And that was evident is on the eastern southern part of South Lebanon. So they attempted Khiyam multiple times for 6 days, and they failed. And then they attempted this at dawn, Aitarun, and they were thwarted by the resistance. And what we saw in Nabi Shit also last night, which resulted in a heavy number of martyrs, but the commando was thwarted attempt by Zionist Israel. We saw 40 martyrs and more than, I think the reports are more than 100 wounded civilians from the attempt, but still Hezbollah is adamant on making sure that the words of Sheikh Naim Qassem are translated on the ground. How do you see that unfolding?
I think Hezbollah learned from its previous mistakes. Obviously, look, there were mistakes which were committed during the previous war, the negotiations which happened, and Hezbollah pinned its hopes on the Lebanese state. Perhaps it pinned its hopes that the Americans might be able to put more pressure on the Israelis. I don't know if you remember, there was one speech by Sheikh Naim Qassem after the ceasefire deal when he said that Trump has the opportunity of a lifetime in Lebanon if he were to stop the Israelis, to control the Israeli behavior.
What was that opportunity?
That's what I'm saying.
What was it?
The opportunity was that the Americans would focus on their own interest in Lebanon and prevent the Israelis from going too far.
Which
so
means that Hezbollah might have accepted to give its weapons?
No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that the Americans would have forced the Israelis to withdraw, to stop their violations for the sake of American interests. So Sheikh Naim Qassem was presenting a new pragmatic approach on the part of Hezbollah, that if America disassociates itself from Israel in Lebanon, then we're ready to cooperate with the Americans. Now, in terms of weapons, I don't know, but he said that was a rather important shift on the part of Hezbollah, a pragmatic shift. Now, it turned out, as I would argue, that the Americans don't have, or that the Americans are controlled by the Israelis more than the opposite.
That was evident in this war that was kickstarted against the Islamic Republic of Iran.
Perhaps Hezbollah's leadership thought that the Americans would focus on their interests, so they would put a stop or they would restrain Israel. That turned out not to be the case. And so Hezbollah is learning right now, since the Israelis have so much influence over American policy making, then they can't back down at all. They have to insist now on making a deal which can't be manipulated.
And honestly, it's more of a broad chance that was given to the diplomacy in Lebanon, headed by both the president and the prime minister, for 15 months to do something when Hezbollah was accepting every demand and request made by that government, whether in the southern part of the Litani, or with not retaliating against Israel when it killed more than 500 Lebanese civilians, or when it continued to destroy towns and villages, or at some point to target civilians in their homes right here in Beirut as well during those 15 months. So Hezbollah did give way for the government to at least do something, to at least overcome the threats and constant risk of aggression from Zion.
He pinned his hopes on the Americans, that the Americans would pressure Israel. Turned out to be misplaced. Again, it's been proven, as you just said,